She never imagined she would die that day, much less that she'd come back carrying an urgent message for all of humanity. Have you ever felt like something is deeply wrong with the world? As if a silent darkness is creeping closer. As if time is running out, even though no one wants to admit it. This is the true story of an ordinary woman who had an extraordinary experience. She died, and saw, in terrifying detail, how the world as we know it will end. But she also saw something else. A chance to change, a chance to awaken. What she witnessed beyond the veil was not just light and peace. She was shown a future of fire, ash, and silence. A global collapse, a nuclear winter. And then, she came back. This testimony is not just a story, it's a warning, a prophecy, and perhaps your invitation to choose a different path before it's too late. Before we begin, tell me in the comments, do you believe in near-death experiences? And what do you think is coming for humanity? Let's talk about it. This may be the most important conversation you've ever had. Her name was Lina Moretti, a 38-year-old woman living in Florence, Italy. To anyone on the outside, her life looked fine, maybe even enviable. She had a stable job as a graphic designer, a modest but beautiful apartment overlooking a narrow cobblestone street, a cat named Galileo who slept on her chest every night. But what people didn't see, what she barely admitted to herself, was the ache she carried inside. Not the ache of pain exactly, but of emptiness, of questions without answers. Lina had grown up Catholic, but had long since stopped going to church, not out of rebellion, but out of exhaustion. She'd prayed before, as a teen, during her father's long illness. He died anyway, and after that, the silence of God was louder than any sermon. She wasn't bitter. She wasn't angry. Just lost. Like so many of us, she'd buried the big questions under the weight of routine. Why are we here? What happens when we die? Does any of this mean anything at all? Sometimes these thoughts would haunt her during long nights alone. Other times, they were drowned out by deadlines, dishes, and the scroll of her phone. Her mother still called every Sunday. They'd talk about the weather, pasta recipes, and how fast time was going. But Lina never mentioned the dreams she was having. Recurring ones of dark skies, falling stars, and a strange silence settling over the earth. Dreams she dismissed as stress, until the day everything changed. I'd pause for a moment and reflect. Have you ever felt like life is going on autopilot, while something deep inside you longs for something more? Tell me in the comments. Have you ever questioned the meaning of your life or felt like something is missing, even when everything seems fine? I want to hear your thoughts. Your story matters here. There's a certain kind of pain that doesn't scream. It whispers. It lives in quiet moments, in crowded rooms, in morning routines and sleepless nights. For Lina, that pain showed up in ways she couldn't explain to anyone. She wasn't depressed, not in the way people usually define it. She got up, she worked, she smiled at her neighbors, but deep inside, something felt out of place, as if she were watching her own life from behind glass, detached, floating, waiting for something, though she didn't know what. She often stared at the ceiling at 3 a.m., listening to the old radiator hiss in the dark. Her mind would wander to strange places. What if none of this is real? What if we're all just passing through? What if I never find my purpose? She envied people who believed deeply in something, anything, faith, science, love. All she had were questions. She tried yoga, read books about mindfulness, started a gratitude journal like one YouTuber suggested, but none of it filled the gap. There was a hunger in her soul, and no one around her seemed to notice it existed. Then, the dreams got worse. In one, she was standing in a field beneath a blood-red sky. The birds had stopped singing. The earth was still, too still. Then a wind came, not cold, not warm, just empty. And in the distance, she saw buildings crumbling, people running, fire falling like rain. She'd wake up with tears on her face and the sheets twisted around her legs. What did it mean? She Googled things like end-of-the-world dreams and apocalyptic visions. Most of the results felt hollow. New Age blogs, clickbait lists. She closed her laptop and went back to making coffee, as if the ache inside her hadn't just grown louder. There was one moment, though, she never forgot. She was walking home from work late one evening, headphones in, when a street preacher's voice broke through the noise. You think there's time, but one day, there won't be. God still speaks, but are you listening? Lina turned to look, but the man was already gone. That night, she had the strongest feeling that something was coming, and not just for her. Be honest, Have you ever felt that quiet emptiness inside? Like you're here for something more, but you don't know what it is yet? Share with me in the comments. Have you ever had a dream or feeling you couldn't explain? One that made you wonder if it was more than just a dream? Let's open this space for real stories, real souls. It was a Tuesday. Not a special day. Not a holiday. Just a Tuesday. The kind of day you forget the details of by the time you fall asleep. But for Lena Moretti, it would become the day everything ended and began again. That morning, she spilled coffee on her favorite sweater. She was late to a meeting. The Wi-Fi was slow. Her cat knocked over a plant. Small annoyances, nothing out of the ordinary. But looking back later, she remembered a strange feeling, a weight in the air, a quiet hum beneath everything, like the world was holding its breath. She left work early that day. The sky had turned a pale gray, the kind of color that blurs everything it touches. She felt uneasy but brushed it off. Just stress, she thought. She got in her car, buckled her seatbelt. She was driving along the edge of the city, a winding road that cut through fields and tall cypress trees. She was thinking about nothing in particular, just the usual. What to eat, what emails she'd ignored, how tired she felt. That's when she saw it. A truck, coming too fast, on the wrong side of the road. She didn't even have time to scream, just the sound of tires skidding, metal folding into metal, glass shattering like stars across her vision. Then, silence. But not the silence of unconsciousness. Something deeper, wider, as if all the sound in the world had been pulled away. She wasn't in her body anymore, but she wasn't somewhere else yet either. She was suspended in nothingness. And the strange thing was, she felt no fear. In the hospital report, the doctors wrote, severe head trauma, no heartbeat for approximately 4 minutes. But Lena remembers it differently. To her, it wasn't 4 minutes. It was a lifetime. Akawa! Have you ever experienced a moment that split your life into a before and after? A moment when time seemed to stop, whether from trauma, beauty, or something unexplainable? Share your moment in the comments below. What changed everything for you? Your story might resonate with someone else who needs it right now. There's no warning when death arrives. No gentle whisper. No countdown. It just happens. And in Lena's case, it came like a thief in the blur of crumpled metal and broken glass. But what came next was nothing like what she'd feared all her life. At first, there was darkness, not the terrifying kind, more like a vast, velvety nothing, like being wrapped in the night sky itself. Then, she felt her body disappear. No pain, no weight, just presence, just awareness. She opened her eyes, but not with her physical ones. She wasn't in her car anymore. She wasn't even on the road. She was floating, above. She could see it all. The twisted wreckage, her body slumped against the seat, blood running across her forehead like a slow crimson river. But the strange thing was, she wasn't afraid. She looked down at herself and felt nothing but curiosity, like observing someone else's tragedy. There was no attachment, no panic. She noticed other things too, colors more vivid than anything she'd ever seen. Sounds that weren't exactly sounds, but feelings that echoed like music through her chest. And then the most surreal moment of all. She felt a pull, not with force, but with warmth, like a gentle invitation. And just like that, she wasn't floating above the crash anymore. She was in a new place, a place without time, without gravity, just peace. Everything she had ever feared about death, gone. The loneliness, the darkness, the void, none of it was real. What awaited her was more real than anything she'd ever known. I wasn't dead, she would later say. I was finally awake. What do you imagine the moment of death feels like? Is it terrifying? Is it peaceful? Is it a doorway or an ending? Be honest with me in the comments. Have you ever thought about what your final moment might be like and what comes after? Let's open up the conversation. You're not alone in these thoughts. Lena was no longer in a body. She had no skin, no breath, no heartbeat. But she had vision. She had awareness. And above all, she had peace. She found herself in a vast expanse of golden light, stretching in every direction like a living sunrise. It wasn't a place in the way we think of places. There were no walls, no floor, no ceiling, just presence. And in that presence, she could feel everything. Not just her own thoughts, but the thoughts of the universe. Every vibration, every whisper. It was as if she had become part of something infinite, and yet, still completely herself. And then, a figure appeared, not with footsteps, not walking, just arriving, like light forming into form. He didn't need to speak, because when Lena saw him, she knew exactly who he was. Jesus. Not the painted version she'd seen in cathedrals, not the symbol from books, but a presence so full of love, it made every cell in her being weep. She didn't feel judged. She didn't feel small. She felt seen, entirely. Like every wound, every doubt, every lonely night had been known and held in his heart. He reached out, not with hands, but with light. And when that light touched her, she felt every memory of her life rise up at once. Moments she'd forgotten, words she wished she could take back, times she was kind, times she wasn't. But there was no shame, only truth, and something deeper, purpose. Then Jesus looked at her, and without moving his mouth, she heard his voice inside her soul. You must see what comes if humanity does not return to the light. And in an instant, the golden place around her dissolved. She was somewhere else. The light faded, and darkness rose. She stood on what looked like the earth, but it was not the earth she knew. Ash covered the ground like snow. The skies were gray and thick. The sun was gone. And everything was cold. Not just the temperature, the spirit of the place was frozen. Hope had died here. She saw cities in ruins, children crying without parents, men with hollow eyes, women kneeling beside poisoned rivers. She saw bombs falling, fire spreading, and the sky turning black. She saw people turning against each other. And worst of all, she saw that no one was praying anymore, because they had stopped believing. She wanted to scream, but she had no voice. This is the future you are heading toward, Jesus told her, not with anger, but with sorrow. A world without me, without love, without light. She fell to her knees, sobbing without tears. And then, just as suddenly, he lifted her up. But it is not too late. There is still time. Go back. Tell them. Warn them. And in that moment, she understood. She had died not by accident, but by design, to bring back a message. Can you imagine what it would be like to look into the eyes of pure love and be told the world is running out of time? Tell me in the comments. If you saw what Lena saw, would it change the way you live today? Would you listen? Would you believe? Your thoughts might awaken something in someone else. Don't hold back. The revelation that changed everything. What Lena had just witnessed wasn't simply a nightmare of the future. It was a warning wrapped in truth. She stood beside Jesus, though there was no ground beneath her. They hovered above what looked like a shattered earth. And suddenly, it was as if a curtain was pulled back, and she began to see what had led to the end. It wasn't just war, not just bombs, greed, or pollution. The destruction of the world had started inside the human heart. She saw it clearly. People choosing selfishness over compassion, truth being traded for convenience, faith becoming an afterthought, until it vanished completely. She saw leaders rise who spoke in the name of progress, but silenced the soul of their people. She saw families torn apart not by death, but by disconnection, people side by side, but more alone than ever. All eyes locked on screens, while their spirits quietly starved. She saw nature crying out, floods, fires, droughts, not just as events of the earth, but as a response to spiritual decay. And most painfully, she saw that many had been warned, but they ignored it. They laughed. They called it fear-mongering, religion, madness. And in that ignorance, time ran out. Then Jesus spoke again. His voice wasn't loud, but it shook everything inside her. There will be a final moment of choice. The earth will be given one last chance to return to love. The winds are already turning. The seals are already opening, but the hearts of many remain closed. Lena wept, not for herself, but for us, for humanity, for the billions walking through life with earbuds in, hearts numb, souls asleep, unaware that eternity is just one breath away. She asked him, through her thoughts, "Will anyone listen to me if I go back?" And he answered simply, "Tell your truth. It is not your voice that awakens them. It is mine, speaking through you." In that moment, Lena's mission became clear. She hadn't been chosen because she was holy or perfect, but because she had once been just like us, lost, distracted, disconnected. And now, she was being sent back with something precious, time, and a voice to use it. What do you think is causing the world to fall apart from the inside? Is it political, spiritual, emotional? I need to know your truth in the comments. What do you think humanity needs to remember before it's too late? Be brave. Be honest. Let's talk about it now, while we still can. The nuclear winter and humanity's despair. What Lena saw next would be etched into her soul forever. She wasn't just shown the causes of the end. She was taken into the aftermath. The vision shifted. The skies above her grew darker, denser, like thick iron smoke pressing down on the earth. And then, without warning, she saw the sky explode. A burst of fire, a mushroom cloud expanding in slow, silent horror. She felt it, not in her body, but in her very essence. The heat, the panic, the suffocation, and then silence. Everything fell still, not just for minutes or hours, for years. The earth had become a graveyard, not just of bodies, but of spirit. Snow fell, but it was not snow. Ash, endless ash. It coated the streets, the trees, the bones. It filled the mouths of the dead and the lungs of the dying. She saw cities unrecognizable. Skyscrapers crumbled like sandcastles. Cars frozen in intersections, their drivers long gone. There were survivors, but they were not the same. They wandered in silence, covered in rags and soot. Eyes hollow, skin gray from the cold and the radiation. They didn't speak. They didn't cry. They just existed. And worst of all, there was no prayer, no altars, no hymns, no one looking up, no one hoping. This is what happens, Jesus whispered, when the world forgets its soul. Lena saw that this winter wasn't just physical, it was spiritual. It was the result of generations choosing comfort over courage, noise over truth, control over surrender. And in this frozen world, the only warmth came from those few, so few, who still believed. They were like flickering candles in a sea of dark ice. And Lena understood. Even one light can break the cold. She cried out without a voice, "Can this be stopped?" And Jesus, with sorrow and urgency, answered, "Not by force, not by fear, only by awakening." And that's why she had to return, not to frighten, but to ignite, to be a spark in this growing cold, so that others might awaken before the last light goes out. What would you do if you knew the world was heading into darkness, and you had the power to light even one small flame? Please tell me in the comments. What does your flame look like? How can you bring light into this world right now, today? Let's inspire one another. Let's not wait until it's too late. Lena stood in the silence after the storm. The vision of nuclear winter, the screams without sound, the children wandering through ash, it all faded slowly, like mist, but its weight clung to her spirit like a second skin. She turned back to the radiant presence beside her, Jesus. His expression was not angry, not cold, but sorrowful, compassionate, and filled with an urgency that pulsed through her like electricity. She wanted to ask, why me? Why was she being shown this? Why had she, just an ordinary woman, been chosen to carry a message that could shake the foundations of everything? But he knew her thoughts before she spoke, because you still have a heart that listens, and a voice that can awaken. He reached out, and in a flash, she was shown the two paths humanity now faced. On one side, what she had already seen, collapse, division, the earth crying out under the weight of spiritual emptiness. On the other, something astonishing. She saw people falling to their knees, not in fear, but in surrender. She saw communities rebuilding, not just structures, but trust. She saw young people choosing truth over trend. She saw scientists praying before their research. She saw governments humbled. She saw families holding each other again, not because they had to, but because they remembered how. She saw people turning their eyes back to heaven, and heaven responding. She saw the earth heal. Not instantly, not easily, but completely. It wasn't too late, but time was thin, like paper held to a flame. "Tell them," Jesus said. "Tell them they are not abandoned. Tell them I never stopped speaking. Tell them to come back, before the door closes." And then, he said one more thing, and this would echo in her heart every day after her return. "Light is still stronger than darkness, but it must be chosen." I can. At that moment, Lena knew. She wasn't being given a second chance at life. She was being sent back on a mission to speak when the world no longer listens, to love when it feels easier to turn away, to remind a generation numbed by screens and noise that eternity is real, and that heaven is closer than we think. When she opened her eyes again, back in the hospital bed, tubes in her veins and doctors shouting above her, she wasn't afraid. She was awake, fully, finally, and she had something to say. To us, to you, to anyone still willing to listen. If you knew time was running out, not just for the planet, but for the soul of humanity? What would you do today that you've been avoiding? Be part of this moment. Tell me in the comments. What truth do you feel called to share before the door closes? You never know who your words might reach. Say them now, while there's still time. Coming back was not beautiful. It was violent. One moment, Lena was surrounded by golden light, her soul gently resting in the presence of eternal love. The next, she was being dragged through what felt like ice, weight, noise, pain. So much pain. Her chest burned, her body screamed, machines beeped in chaos. A nurse shouted, "She's back! She's back!" Doctors leaned over her with wide eyes and trembling hands. She gasped, first breath after death, but it felt more like drowning than breathing, because nothing in this world could compare to what she had just left behind. The hospital walls felt too close. Her skin felt foreign. Everything was heavy. Gravity, sorrow, noise, lights, like 1,000 needles on her senses. And worse than all of that, no one believed her. She tried to explain, tried to tell the doctors what she saw, what she heard, what she now knew to be more real than anything they could measure. But they just smiled politely, called it hallucinations, blamed the brain's chemicals, the trauma, the near-death delusion. Even her mother looked at her with fear behind her eyes. Maybe it was just a dream, Kara. Maybe it's better not to think too much. But Lena knew. It was no dream. And staying silent was no longer an option. The hardest part wasn't the physical healing. It was existing again in a world that fell to sleep. She walked down the same streets, but everything looked different. People on their phones, laughing in cafes, rushing to work, unaware that heaven is real, that eternity is waiting, that the path we're walking leads somewhere final. She wanted to grab them, shake them, shout, "There's still time, but not forever. Don't waste it. Wake up." But instead, she whispered, one person at a time, a post, a message, a quiet conversation. Some rolled their eyes, some unfollowed, but others paused. And a few whispered back, "I've seen something too. I had a dream like that once. I felt it. I just didn't know how to explain it." And with each soul that listened, Lena felt the pain lessen, just a little, because this is the price of awakening. You come back changed, and the world does not know what to do with you. But you speak anyway, because the message is not yours to keep. It was given to you, and it's meant to be shared. Have you ever felt like you woke up to something real, but the world around you stayed asleep? Please open your heart in the comments. What truth have you tried to share, only to be met with silence or rejection? How did you keep going? Let's support each other. You're not alone in this. Coming back to life wasn't beautiful. It wasn't cinematic. There was no soft music, no graceful awakening. It felt like being ripped out of eternity and slammed back into a prison made of skin and gravity. One moment, Lena was floating in divine stillness, soaked in love, guided by light, weightless in the presence of Jesus himself. The next, she was gasping, choking, thrashing, cold metal under her, needles in her arms, fluorescent lights stabbing her retinas, doctors yelling, machines screaming. "She's back! My God, she's actually back!" But Lena wasn't sure she wanted to be. She could feel the pain return before she could feel her limbs, the pressure in her chest, the dull ache behind her eyes, and worst of all, the absence of him. Her physical recovery took weeks, but her soul was the part that hurt the most. She would lie in the hospital bed at night staring at the ceiling, not from boredom, but from mourning. She wasn't grieving the accident. She was grieving heaven. The love she had tasted, the total, unconditional, pure presence of God, was now a memory so vivid it made this world feel flat, colorless, noisy, but hollow. She couldn't explain it to the nurses. She tried. They nodded kindly and offered more medication. They called it post-traumatic confusion. Some called it spiritual delusion. But Lena knew. She remembered. The light, the voice, the vision of Earth's end, the mission. When she left the hospital and returned to her apartment in Florence, everything felt wrong. The walls seemed too close, the air too thin, the ticking clock too loud. She walked through her once familiar space and barely recognized it. The books on her shelves meant nothing now. The art she used to create felt empty. Even her cat Galileo purred beside her chest like before. But Lena felt 1,000 galaxies away. She tried to rejoin normal life. But how do you go back to grocery lists and email notifications when you've seen the end of the world? How do you explain to your friends that you died, saw Jesus, and were told that humanity is on the brink of eternal collapse? They smiled. They humored her. But behind their eyes, fear, disbelief, pity. Some distanced themselves. Some stayed, but never asked again. And that, more than the accident, more than the hospital, was the most painful part. The loneliness of the awakened. Aha! But Lena didn't stop speaking. Because even if her voice trembled, even if no one understood, even if she felt like a foreigner in her own life, she had been given truth. And truth is not meant to be buried. She started writing. At first just in a journal, then blog posts, then videos. And slowly, quietly, people began to listen. Not many, but a few. A woman in Argentina who'd had the same dream. A soldier in Canada who'd died and returned with the same message. A teenager in Kenya who'd seen fire falling from the sky in prayer. She realized something profound. She wasn't alone. There were others, scattered across the globe. Whispers of eternity waking up inside broken people. And those people, like her, were being called to light fires in the darkness. Still, every day was hard. Lena missed the light. She missed the presence of Jesus. She missed the clarity of heaven. But each time she felt the pull to give up, she remembered the vision. The gray sky, the weeping children, the final silence, and she would whisper to herself over and over, I came back for a reason. I came back for them, even if they don't believe me yet. Have you ever felt like you were sent back for something, but the world around you couldn't understand your mission? Please share with me in the comments. Have you ever experienced a spiritual awakening that made the world feel foreign? Is there a message burning in you that others just don't seem ready to hear? Your voice matters. Speak it here. Lena doesn't ask if people believe her anymore. She just speaks. She knows what she saw. She knows what she felt. And more than anything, she knows what's coming. Not because she's special, not because she's a prophet, but because she was shown the truth and brought back to carry it. And now this message has reached you, not by accident, not by coincidence. You're hearing these words right now because something in you is ready to remember, ready to wake up, to feel, to look up again. The world keeps spinning. The headlines keep shouting. The screens keep distracting. And all the while, time keeps thinning. Lena said it clearly. The future isn't written in stone, but it is being shaped by our hearts. Every choice matters. Every voice matters, especially yours. She isn't telling this story to scare you. She's telling it to prepare you, to remind you that there is still a window, a flicker of time, a divine pause before the door closes. So the question now is not about her. The question is, what will you do with this message? Will you go back to scrolling, to numbing, to ignoring that quiet voice inside? Or will you stop, breathe, and listen? Because this world, your world, is not beyond saving. But it won't be rescued by governments or technology or money. It will be saved by hearts, by awakening, by choosing love over fear, faith over cynicism, purpose over convenience. And that awakening begins with one person, you. What if you were the next to be called, not to die, but to live awake, to carry light in a world that's dimming? I want to know, right now in the comments. What part of Lena's message spoke to you the loudest? What will you do differently to knowing what you know? Don't scroll away. And if you've ever felt alone in your spiritual hunger, if you've ever felt like you were born for something more, then hear this now. You're not alone. You're not crazy. You were born for this exact time in history. To shine, to speak, to stand, before it's too late. If Lena's story touched you, please share this message. Comment, subscribe. Let's build a space for truth to be spoken. Loudly, bravely, unapologetically. The world is waiting. The clock is ticking. Now it's your turn.